Hello, everybody. Welcome to Daily Kos The Brief, our weekly show about politics. I'm Marco Melissas. I'm here today with Carolyn Fiddler, our typical co-host. Carrie Eleveld is out with a family illness. So Carolyn is going to join us today, which is actually quite okay because today we are going to be talking about Virginia. And Carolyn may be one of the foremost authorities on the politics of Virginia. So if you don't know, Virginia has a statewide elections this November. It's one of just a handful of states that have these sort of middle off-year elections. And oftentimes, Virginia is like a favorite of the political class because it's considered a bellwether. Like the president gets elected. 1 year later, you have these Virginia elections in a state that is still not as blue, say, in New Jersey, which also has statewide elections. So everybody wants to see just how motivated both sides of that political divide are to give some clues into what the next year's midterm elections may sound like. So Republicans actually think they have a chance. Polls are showing that we may actually have a competitive race in Virginia. 4 years ago, the outgoing Democratic governor won comfortably by nearly 9 points. And this was after George Bush, after Donald Trump had been elected. So it was a big sign that Democrats were very motivated and that Republicans might have a hard time in that coming midterm election, which they did. Former Governor Terry McAuliffe served in 2014 to 2018. He's back again for another try. And Republicans have nominated Gwen Mills, like in California. Democrats are centering the COVID pandemic in their campaign, arguing that Republicans will put everyone at risk with their anti-vaccine and anti-mask mandate agenda. Meanwhile, Democrats need to protect their lead in the House of Delegates, where all 100 seats are up for grabs. Democrats currently have a 55-45 advantage. There is no seat up for grabs in the Senate, where Democrats have a narrow 21-18 majority. So at least that is safe, if nothing else. So joining us today to talk about this critical election, coming in about 15 minutes, will be two on-the-ground experts. Really excited to talk to them. Gwen Mills is the Secretary-Treasurer of Unite Here. She was the architect of the field program that was the largest labor field program in the 2020 election cycle, and it was very active in states like Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania. In states that are that close, every bit helps. Unite Here played a critical role in locking down those states for the Democrats in 2020. They're active in Virginia this year, so we will talk about their efforts in Virginia. Also joining us in a little bit will be Tram Nguyen. She is the co-executive director of New Virginia Majority. The organization has registered nearly 300,000 new voters and has knocked on over 3.5 million doors in its existence to get people of color and young people to the polls. So these are two people that are on the front lines of this battle to keep Virginia blue. Carolyn, why are we even talking about keeping Virginia blue when it seems that the state has become pretty reliably and solidly Democratic?
Well, so glad you asked. It wasn't all that long ago when Virginia was not reliably blue. In fact, it was very, very reliably red. And that sort of transformation happened very quickly, which should indicate to a careful observer, I think, that it is not a full transformation. Virginia certainly is geographically diverse. You have your big cities, but then you've got a lot of rural outlying areas, a lot of agriculture still happening. Mining was a big industry in Virginia for generations. But so the state is a very mixed bag, like most states, sure. But we will see if Democrats are really as strong in the state as many seem to suspect they are. And Democrats are very strong in the state, but we defy that national sort of okay, a Democrat's in charge and his approval rating is dropping. So what does that mean for a Democrat in Virginia in that off year election? But let's keep in mind that another reason that a lot of people are paying attention to Virginia right now is that, well, it's very close to DC and a lot of reporters who don't have other elections to pay attention to this year. So Virginia does get a little bit of outsized attention, but I don't think it's outsized at all because Virginia is incredibly important and has undergone a lot of drastic changes in the last decade and a half.
So from what I gather, it looks like the battleground is the suburbs. That you have the DC suburbs are reliably Democratic. Then you have the Alabama part of Virginia, which the rural lines. So those are heavily Republican. So you have a battleground in the suburbs, and the Democratic nominee for governor is trying to appear reasonable, and so that he can, and I was reading somewhere where one of his consultants said that Youngkin, he's bringing together the never Trumpers and the always Trumpers together. Do you have any sense that he's actually managing to walk that tightrope, being, I don't know, anti-democracy enough to appeal to the Trump loyalists while still being palatable to Republican voters that at one time probably were Republican and have switched because of Donald Trump and other reasons?
Well, Youngkin is trying so hard to be palatable to both ends of that very odd spectrum that he's ended up standing for nothing. And I think that's actually going to bite him in the butt more than anything else in terms of who he's trying to court, who he's trying to turn out to get that shrinking portion of Republican votes in the Commonwealth, because that portion does seem to be shrinking over time, but it is about who shows up, obviously. So we'll see how excited Democrats are in November versus how excited Republicans are. But Youngkin hasn't just given them very much to get excited about. He won't come out strongly, against for restricting access to safe and legal abortions. He won't come out super strongly for Trump or for throwing out the results of the 2020 election in Trump's favor. So who exactly is he exciting?
I guess that's a big question. And we saw in California, that was a big sort of question in the run up to California, who is going to turn out and vote? And the conventional wisdom was that Republicans were fired up about their chance to get rid of Gavin Newsom, the Democratic governor, and that maybe Democratic voters would be less inclined to turn out and vote. What ended up happening is everybody turned out and voted. And when in California, as a heavily Democratic state, Gavin Newsom won by more votes this time around in a recall than he did when he first originally won. And that had been a record level of victory, over 60% of the vote. So that kind of shattered the conventional wisdom. And suddenly the DC press forgot about California literally overnight because it no longer fit any narrative.
Right.
It would have been interesting had it been close. But once it just sort of reaffirmed that everything's status quo, then so much. We would be lucky if we had status quo in Virginia, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is not a persuasion campaign. This is not about trying, it's about who turns out their voters more. And maybe not even that, because Democrats they've won Virginia comfortably. So they can even suffer a little bit of attrition and still win. But first of all, do you get any sense? And I guess we'll talk to two guests that probably have their pulse right on the here in a little bit. But sure. Do you have a sense of what the level of engagement and excitement is right now?
The level of engagement and excitement is pretty high on both sides. We're hearing more about the GOP and their sort of ground game and field operations. So I'm also very excited to talk to these folks we have on just in a little bit about the ground game on the Democrats side in Virginia. But the thing about this election too that I'm not seeing a ton of discussion about is the fact that Terry McAuliffe is running for non-consecutive reelection. Terry McAuliffe is a known quantity in Virginia, whereas Youngkin keeps putting himself out there as a cipher a little bit. No one, as I mentioned before, no one really knows what he stands for because he won't come out very strongly for or against very much. So you'll have uncertain voters looking at okay, who's this guy, this Youngkin dude? Oh, Terry McAuliffe. He was governor already, and things didn't catch on fire while he was governor. So I'll vote for him again. I think we're gonna be seeing a lot of that too.
What about the race for the General Assembly? Do they have new lines yet, or is it still using the old lines for apportionment?
We're still using the old lines, which are the lines resulting from a lawsuit that found unconstitutional racial gerrymandering in the Commonwealth. So the lines that Democrats are running on are the same ones they ran on in the last two cycles in Virginia. So they are lines that are fairly fair, and Democrats absolutely have some pickup opportunities, but Democrats are also very much playing defense in the House of Delegates in Virginia too. So
Yeah, that's a 55-45 seat Democratic majority. Do you see do Republicans think they have a chance of a majority, or are we playing around the edges of the current composition of the assembly?
I think, and I feel like a lot of sort of observers' donations seem to bear out the fact that a lot of people who are very active in Democratic politics, and I don't mean just activists, I mean actual like businesses and high dollar donors, they are not banking on a Republican majority come next January. But of course, they're hedging their bets as they always do.
Yeah. Is there anything going on in this election that you see that, I mean, you talked a little bit about it's not getting a lot of attention. Like, what do you think the big story out of Virginia is right now that really the DC press is completely missing? Do you see anything like that at all?
I think that well, the DC press has talked a bit about abortion rights in Virginia and how what's happened in Texas that we've talked about on the show previously has really sort of juiced engagement, especially among progressives in Virginia, because you end up with a Republican governor, and what if Republicans were to take back the House of Delegates? That spells very bad things for the future of abortion rights in the Commonwealth. So that's certainly a story, and what's happening in the suburbs and vis-a-vis sort of the current state of COVID in the Commonwealth is also a big issue. A lot of mandates are starting to go into effect, or not super strong mandates, but like mandate or you get tested every week. These things are going into effect, and they're polling pretty well. And case rates in Virginia are falling almost all the way across the map, and that's going to be very good for Terry come November.
Yeah, the California eventually sort of evolved into a referendum on COVID mitigation strategies, including masking and vaccination mandates. And Republicans, for some reason, I think they get sucked into the little Facebook echo chamber, and they think it's a winning issue, right? Because every time, freedom and our children, unmask our children. And it turns out that and polling bears it out that most people do want sensible precautions because nobody wants to die a horrible, painful, lonely COVID death. And so, but in Virginia, it seems like the Republicans are really, that's the strategy they're taking, right? Is it anti-masking mandates and anti-vaccination mandates, right? I mean, there's a very clear division, battle line, or, one side or the other, right? Republicans are very much anti-mandates.
It's become this strange cultural thing all across the country, and this partisan thing all across the country too. So yeah, I think a really correct take would be, what kind of lives are Virginians living at the end of October, beginning of November? Are we having to mask up to do anything? Do we have like crowd restrictions on things, or have things continued to improve? Are case rates continuing to fall? Vaccination rates rising? If that's still happening, that's good news for Democrats all the way down the ballot in November.
So we have our first guest. I think we're ready to bring our first guest on. She is Tram Nguyen. She is the co-executive director, and I think a co-founder as well, of New Virginia Majority. They've knocked on so many doors. They have registered hundreds of thousands of voters. Tram, welcome so much. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So can you start off telling us a little bit about what New Virginia Majority does?
Yeah, so we were founded in 2007 with this premise that if we engage more people of color, more new Americans, more young folks, that we could really shift the political landscape in Virginia. And so,
congrats, you did it.
I know, right? That was hard. For the last 14 years or so, we've done it, right? We have methodically engage more folks, register them to vote, encourage them to vote. And, elections are never our finish line. And so a lot of the advocacy that happens post-election has been, very successful. The last 2 years, we've had a lot of first in the South policies that have changed. And, that's what's at stake in this election, frankly. And I think our voters know that.
So, guys, I'm going to bring in our second guest, and we're going to sort of carry on the show in a little bit of a panel format to talk about what's going on in Virginia on the ground. Our second guest is Gwen Mills. She is the Secretary treasurer of Unite here. She is the architect of the largest labor field program in 2020. Is that true, Gwen? Thank you so much for joining us. And I was reading the bio and it talked about how this program was deployed in states like Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. And we all know that we won those states by about a margin of nothing. And so clearly, Gwen, you're the reason Joe Biden is president today. When races are that close, everybody's the reason. We all got to put in our part. So Gwen, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have us here, to have you here.
Thank you for the invite. Thank you.
So we started asking Tram what New Virginia Majority was doing in Virginia. So let me ask you what work Unite Here is doing in Virginia to help win this November's elections.
Yeah, absolutely. So I caught the tail end of Tram's comments and I could not agree more. And all of the work that they've done to invest and build the new voting majority in the state, both during elections and afterwards, has been great. Our union, Our union is hospitality workers, hotel workers, food service workers, airport workers. We have about 3,000 members in Virginia. And just like Tram said, the work to build working class power and power for people of color and young voters happens all around the election cycle. So our members are organizing in the shops and trying to improve the quality of their lives, their wages, their benefits, their healthcare, and now really handle COVID and COVID layoffs. In this election in particular, we have a whole team on the ground that's going door to door. To date, we've knocked on about 60,000 doors in Virginia. And I have a bunch of stories to tell you from our team, and that's what we're up to. We believe that in races this close, we all matter, but every voter in the state matters, and particularly ones that feel like they don't have a reason to vote because they feel disconnected and ignored by the system.
One of the big questions I have right now is there's sort of this assumption that Virginia is a safe blue state now. And suddenly you've seen polling and there's some chatter that maybe not so safe. Maybe we need to pay attention. And we saw a lot of this in California where it's like, don't take it for granted. And once people didn't take it for granted, we won fine. But it was a question of like, let's make sure everybody votes that needs to vote. Is there danger in Virginia is there any real, that you guys are seeing any real danger on the ground? Or is this just more of a, if we do what we need to do and we turn out to vote, we're going to be fine? I'll ask you, Gwen, first.
Absolutely. I think there's definitely a danger. I think Virginia is not a blue state. I spent the year of 2008 in Virginia, working in Southern Virginia, and Richmond and Petersburg and Tidewater to register 10,000 people to vote and have the state go blue for the first time since 1964. So in my memory, Virginia is not a blue state. It's very much a battleground. It's very much a purple state. It's like Nevada and Arizona and those other places you mentioned. So we talked to a lot of voters on the ground, and most of them that we talked to do support McAuliffe and people in the delegate races that we're supporting. But too many think that their vote in the primary was their vote, or that their application to get a mail ballot was actually the ballot itself. And the door-to-door work, the talking to people, the connecting on people's doorsteps where they're at, if we don't do more of that and ramp up beyond what we're doing, we will not win this election. I don't think we're on track to win without more investment in the field program.
Tram, you're also actually. So let me ask Tram the same question, Carolyn, and then I'll let you can come in. I'm curious what you're seeing. I know you're focused a lot on more of the communities of color and young people. What are you seeing as far as engagement in this on the ground, towards this November election?
Well, I mean, I'll first say that I'm in always a constant and perpetual state of anxiety when it comes to elections. You have elections every year, and there's always so much on the line every year. So I will never feel good until, the polls actually close and, we've done everything we can and we've laid everything out on the line. That being said, I mean, we're having great conversations on the doors. Last year was hard. We weren't as, much on the doors as, we've been previously. We're back out there today. This year on the phones, on the doors, having really productive and positive conversations with voters. They know what's at stake. Healthcare is top of mind. We are still in the middle of this pandemic, right? And so there's a lot of, concerns about going backwards if we don't keep the Democratic majority and keep Virginia moving forward, not only on healthcare, but on education and on all kinds of issues that we've made so much progress on. So I think that, if we keep this up over the next 5 weeks, then voters will turn out and we will do what we would have needed to do to keep our majority. But there's a lot of work to do over 5 weeks. So we're not letting up at all. And I think in part because we know that there's so much on the line, right? Real lives and livelihoods are absolutely at stake right now. And not only for Virginia, but Virginia's always this bellwether state. You think about like the midterms after every single, gubernatorial off cycle that we have in Virginia, it bodes, it's a very telling story that folks look to when we think about 2022 midterms. I think people are going to take a look at Virginia and what happened here as an indication of, what they need to focus on or what voters are going to be important and what the electorate's going to be. And so, yeah, I'm just in a constant state of anxiety. I'll be honest. It just does not go away.
I find that highly relatable. As someone who was working in Virginia back when, I see House of Delegates like signs that don't have Republicans Party on it, and I remember when Democrats used to not put their party on signs in Virginia.
We get that all the time. Like when people are like, "Oh, I just saw this ad," or "I have this lit. It's bilingual." But it doesn't say Republican. They are going after our voters in a very we're a nice person. Give us a chance, and we have to do a lot of the education on the back end. Be like, well.
It's like, no, they really actually don't like you at all. And we'll do things for you.
Yeah.
So I have heard some no actual data to this effect, but since y'all are on the ground, I would love to get y'all's take on this. I am hearing tale of Republicans' ground game being really robust this cycle. I was wondering if y'all could offer some comments on that to make me feel better, make me feel worse.
I can start. I don't know if I'm going to make you feel better.
Perpetual state of anxiety. Yes.
Perpetual state of anxiety.
This is the theme.
This is just where I'm going to be until November, so it's fine. I just expect it.
I haven't seen the Republicans have as much of a robust ground game as they have had this year. And not only that, but they are reaching out to our voters, right? Yeah. They are using bilingual lit. They're hitting the Latinx population. The Asian population, wishing folks a happy Korean Thanksgiving in language. And I'm like,
wow.
Some very specific things that it's just new to them. The other thing that is a change from last year is they're really encouraging people to early vote. And so it's a huge switch for them. And so it's also hard for us to just look at early vote numbers and get a sense of, okay, are we doing okay or are we not?
Right. So fun fact for probably many viewers out there, you cannot register by party in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So we don't know who requested those ballots in terms of, how they are registered in the Commonwealth, because you can't do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Gwen, do you have some insight? Yeah. Please.
Ditto certainly to everything that Tram has said, and the Republican strategies are getting more sophisticated on the ground. That being said, our team hasn't seen as many door knockers, the sort of same type of thing. But I do think those sophisticated efforts make inroads. And I think the Democratic Party takes working class voters of color, young voters for granted, sort of way too many times. And I think the work that we're collectively doing to get out and really talk to people on their doorsteps, to hear about the issues, to just make that human to human connection and not take something for granted based on some demographics, is just needs to be done all the way through till the end and off cycle and next cycle and over and over.
Yeah, it's exhausting that we have that conversation about the Democratic Party taking pretty much everybody for granted. Everybody, right?
Single cycle.
Every time. So, Gwen, you represent hospitality workers. You're like, you basically represent what everybody calls essential workers now. These are people that are working face to face in hospitality situations. They are at incredible risk of COVID, of contamination. Is that a motivating factor in this campaign? Is the Republican effort to oppose mask and vaccine mandates, is that playing with your people, or is that just par for the course, just something else Republicans are on the wrong side of?
No, I think absolutely. I think our members want to have safe workplaces, want to be able to get back to work and continue their livelihoods, and they can see the sort of Republican agenda making that difficult. But I think it's more that they've actually been very moved by what the Democrats have put in place over this year. So I was just hearing from one of our canvassers, Deepak, who's 25 years old, who works in the hotel industry in Washington, D.C., who ran into a voter. The voter said he was independent and was worried that his kids were going to bear the burden of all the debt from the American Rescue Plan. So, he had gotten a Republican talking point there. And Deepak says to him, I told him my story about not having a job in insurance during COVID, about the hotel industry laying me off and being able to benefit from the ARP to put food on the table and rent, and said, look, this money is going to people who need it. And it's not overspending. It's like basic affordable health care, like wage replacement during the layoffs. And that's the type of thing that our members are more focused on. And that motivates them, and in turn motivates the voters that they're talking to.
Right. Tram, how has canvassing changed from 2020 to 2021, just in terms of safe interactions with voters and so on? Are people able to go back out and knock on doors safely again?
We've been knocking doors since March in person. We have a lot of safety measures in place. Folks are still masked despite being vaccinated. We have a vaccine mandate at our organization, so folks are vaccinated and all that, but we still, have folks mask up. They're still physically distancing, just to make sure that folks are feeling comfortable and safe having these conversations. And also because we have a responsibility to keep our communities safe, right? We look at, infection rates and vax rates in communities of color, and they're lower, right? And so we just want to make sure that we are also keeping our communities very safe. But we're back on the doors. It's slower, right? Knock rates, contact rates are slower because of all of these different precautions that we're taking. But again, the conversations that we're having on the doors are amazing. People are excited to talk to people again, and we saw that.
So relatable.
Right? It's like, oh, there's a human. We gotta move this along. I remember knocking doors over the summer, and there was one woman who I had to have a 25-minute conversation with. I'm like, I gotta go. I gotta go. But it's an interaction in a really long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely ways to do it safe, and we make sure that our communities and our canvassers are all safe.
Yeah, Gwen, you when I was reading up on your bio, there's a lot of talk about how you really sort of put together a field program that was COVID safe and mitigate a lot of those risks. Can you talk a little bit about what you helped implement that made that canvassing safer? And have you changed that at all this year, given the vaccines and less risk?
Sure. Yeah. Just speaking, it was, if you rewind, we were launching our field program in June of last year. So 2 months after COVID started, in Nevada and Arizona in particular, those swing states out west that we needed to win the presidential race. And, no one wanted to go on the doors. The party wasn't knocking. And what our experience was if essential workers are being put on the front line to go to work to keep the economy running, then we can have people be safe doing that, then we can have people be safe canvassing. And we wanted to consider canvassing like the essential work of democracy last summer in 2020. And so we developed these protocols where we called it a contactless canvass. And we trained people as if everyone we came into contact with had COVID, your fellow canvassers, potential voters, anyone you met along the way. So our system wasn't to try to keep people with COVID out. It was to take the precautions, social distancing, the hand washing, the masks, not being indoors at all, to the next level. So we launched on Zoom a lot. We ultimately progressed to launching in parks. This year, one thing that's changed is we will, with a big enough space, go indoors to have some groups of people do training and things like that. One of the best things that our members figured out last year about being on the doors was we wouldn't talk to anyone unmasked at the door. So they'd knock on the door, they'd stand back 6 feet. Someone would come to the door and we'd say, "Hi, I'm from so-and-so, can you put your mask on?" 75% of voters put their mask on right away. But our members, being hospitality workers, were carrying a box of masks and handed them over as if it was a plate of hors d'oeuvres. And the other 25%, 20%, of those folks just like took the mask and put it on. So we had almost no conversations at the door where we had to say, "I'm sorry, we can't do this conversation because you won't mask up." And those protocols really kept us out there on the doors through 2020 safe. And we continue to practice them today.
Tram, I have a question, sort of more field stuff, because I just think that's a really cool thing to talk about. And, our community here at Daily Kos is a lot of organizers, a lot of folks who do this work in their own states. And so I'm curious about like sort of what you're seeing at the doors on the ground in your organizing now versus what you were seeing in 2019, I guess specific to like House of Delegates races, because that's the overlap between now and 2019 in Virginia. So do you have a sort of some comparison and contrasting you can do there, or?
I would say a lot of the top issues are the same, but it's how people are talking about them that is a little bit more nuanced, right? So, for example, healthcare is just a perpetual #1 issue for folks. Even when we were fighting for Medicaid expansion for, that was like a 7-year fight, to, to today, where healthcare is really around the pandemic. People are very nervous. You have families who have kids who are in person at school now. A lot of them aren't vaccinated, right? And so it's not just about vaccine mandates and masks and keeping us safe from COVID, but also what happens if I get sick? And so that sort of translates into family, paid family and medical leave being a #1 issue, which, if Democrats hold the trifecta, we're very hopeful that that's going to be a #1 priority, right? And so, I think the issues might remain very similar, but the conversations have evolved, in part because we've also made so much progress in our state legislature, right? So it's a lot of, "Oh, you like that thing? You like marijuana legalization?" Everybody gets excited about marijuana legalization.
It holds so well. Just
right. And when you remind them, it's like, well, what we did wasn't quite there just yet, right? It's not going to be fully legal until 2024. And guess what? Who is in the House of Delegates really, really matters. And so if you care about that, like we got to get these folks back in. And so it's a little bit more of a, the conversations have taken on a little bit more urgency because there's so much on the line. And maybe that's why I'm always just anxious, because I'm like, oh my God, if we lose, we go backwards. Like they could really just undo everything that we just haven't even had time to celebrate yet.
I know, right?
I want to celebrate. I want my celebration, damn it. So, so I think that's like the conversations have definitely taken on more urgency.
Yeah, Gwen, we're seeing kind of in that theme, we're seeing in some national polling that people don't give Democrats credit for things like the American Rescue Plan, where they say that they have been helped by government programs, but they haven't been helped by Joe Biden, right? That kind of formulation. Is there any sense of that maybe? Do you see that at all in Virginia, where you've had this Democratic trifecta, and there's been great progressive legislation. Is there any sense that Democrats are getting credit for that? Or are people still not able, that is still a messaging issue where Democrats can't sell their own accomplishments?
Not to sound like a broken drum, but I think the best people to sell the Democrats' accomplishment are organizations like Trams, are unions, are people who can relate to the voters on the doors and can do it face to face. Like just, another story, a lot of our members are East African and live in the Northern Virginia East African community. So we're there a lot in those high rises. And, one of our canvassers, Ismail, was in the community and was talking to a voter in the neighborhood who said, I'm disillusioned. I don't want to vote. Yeah, I got this and that, but it just was like, I think we run into this a lot, a kind of like, oof, whatever. But Ismail was able to say, look, it really was Democrats that like expanded Medicaid, that passed this child care tax credit. I mean, the child care tax credit is a huge thing that Democrats could career on, with every voter with children in the country. But for some reason, it seems like we have to help deliver that message. And so, but as soon as you connect it, people are like, oh yeah, and want to be right there.
And that face-to-face contact really, I mean, you're right. If you think about it, the politicians, the party doesn't really have any of that real direct connection. They have those communications via TV ads, via, Facebook, whatever. But yeah, that person-to-person contact can be so incredibly powerful. I'm curious, Tram, when your canvassers knock on a door, do they have a script that they're working on? How do you drill down to what that individual person is interested in? What's that process look like?
Well, there is a script, but the script is sort of meant more as a guide, right? For folks to, jumpstart a conversation. But we really focus on having authentic conversations with people, right? We're not just trying to make a pitch and then say, so can we count on you to vote for, so-and-so, or can we count on you to vote in November? It's really a conversation around like, what is important to you? Like, what do you think is really at stake in this election, and really teasing it out. And then that's when folks can have that conversation, if it's specific to healthcare or if it's specific to education equity or whatever issue it is that the voter brings up. And we have, we train our folks up very well on all of the different issues and how to, how to talk about them and where do the candidates actually stand. But the script is a very helpful guide, right? To just make sure that, you're asking the questions that do need to be asked, because we do need to collect that data, right? In terms of, oh, that person said they're voting early. We can follow up with them sooner rather than later, for example. But yeah, I think it's very important to make sure that our canvassers are as well prepared as possible as they have these conversations, but not to be too scripted as to sound robotic, right? That we are really developing authentic conversations. Because remember, November's not our finish line. We're here to stay. We don't just, do a get out the vote campaign and we're done. We follow up with these folks after November. So we phone, do phone banking in November, December, leading up to our January legislative session. And I remember like the first time folks would hear from us, they would actually be really surprised. And they'd say, wait, what? You're calling me again? Like, I already voted.
Right.
And we're like, no, we know you voted. That's great. But you also said that education was your number one issue. And, we've got this legislation pending and we want to, keep you informed. Like, do you want to be engaged with us? Do you want, and so we really try to develop those relationships. So anyway, back to your original question. Yes, we have a script, but it's really more like a guideline so that we can have those conversations and organize people into, civically engaged long-term members and citizens.
And actually, that's a good segue into what I think is a really important thing to kind of point out. And like, has always been something that's sort of troubled me about the Democratic Party is that infrastructure. Organizations like unions and organizations like New Virginia Majority that are around and stick around and don't just go away after an election are so important to building that long-term power in states. And I think a lot of that gets lost. I know after the 2016 elections, a lot of new progressive groups popped up to fight Donald Trump, and not all of those are still around. But and I know obviously New Virginia Majority and obviously Unite Here and other unions long predate that. But I think it's super important, and I'm super grateful to organizations like yours, like New Virginia Majority, for not just sticking it out through like 2008 or 2010 or 2012, but sticking around and doing that hard work. And I know that it's a special challenge to go from that new organization to entrench part of an infrastructure, and I know that's hard, and I'm really glad that y'all are doing that. And what would be some advice you have for other groups that are trying to go from that like new shiny thing to like real progressive infrastructure?
Oh, keep at it, right? I mean, winning is going to feel like losing sometimes. It absolutely does. And look at what's happening in Congress, right? Like, this should be easy.
We all were around during, after 2009 in Virginia, and that was just not a good year for Democrats in the Commonwealth.
I mean, we've gotten our butts kicked many, many times, but when you win every inch that you win, you hang on to that inch and you keep fighting. And I think it's just this reminder that our work doesn't end with every election cycle. Our work is really about empowering our communities and making a difference, right? And that means that if we're going to try to unpack, generations of policies that have left a lot of our communities behind, to unpack that is going to take years and years and years. Our best campaigns, our most successful campaigns, Medicaid expansion, rights restoration, driver privilege cards for immigrants, like those have all been 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year campaigns, right? Change is long, change is hard. We got to keep going, and you will eventually change the political landscape. You look at Georgia, you look at Arizona, you look at all of these places. Those have all been 10-year plus battles, right? And we're still moving forward.
Gwen, I'm still fascinated by door-to-door knockers, because it's something that I would never do in a million years, because I have severe social anxiety. And so I am always so impressed and so grateful for people that do that kind of work. Who is doing this door-to-door knocking for you? Is it volunteer union members? Are you actively soliciting them? I know you built this incredible army of people doing incredible work. Where do they come from?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is just going to have to turn into a recruiting conversation, because you are certainly welcome to join us. And we have all sorts of ways for people to get over their anxiety, because honestly, a number of our members don't think of themselves necessarily as a canvasser, right? But most of the people are folks who have experience building organization in the shop. So maybe they've been someone that their coworkers turn to when they have problems at work or on the shop floor, or someone, the employer shortchanges the hours in your check and you don't know what to do about it. Well, who do you go talk to? It's a leader in the workplace, right? And so part of what our local unions do is, as we're working on leadership development and building that kind of skill and collective action in the shop, is we talk about why we need elected officials on our side and we need policy changes, and invite people, first to come out on volunteer door knocks on Saturdays or something like that. We also do a lot of voter registration and citizenship work inside the shop. So our members learn how to take voter registration cards into their workplaces and talk with their coworkers. So it's people that they know in an environment that they're comfortable with, and they start talking about politics. And then they're like, oh, this is kind of fun. And then they come out on a Saturday and knock on some doors and talk to people in their neighborhoods, right? So you try to introduce a new element each time, right? And then by the time someone is actually taken a leave of absence for work or become a full-time paid canvasser where they're doing this 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, at that point, they've had a number of experiences, often over multiple years. I mean, up to a decade, people have been in this learning and growing and And I think it's that experience that makes the conversations on the doors a quality experience, because people have, been chipping away at how to do this for some time.
God, I love that. It's amazing. It's you can read a stats about so many doors knocked and this many people were talked to, but really, I've been in working in politics now, Daily Kos, almost 20 years, and I've never really. I'm like almost kind of a little bit afraid of even asking about that. So it's really fascinating to get a little bit of a look inside behind the curtain. So I really appreciate that. That was very.
If I could just add, I mean, every time the cycle starts again and I go knocking, I knocked in all those states you talked about last year. And like, I always like to be on the ground knocking the doors myself. I still get a little pit in my stomach every time when I start knocking again, because it's just something in our culture that we're trained, in the dominant culture to get more isolated from each other. And I feel like as we break down those barriers, it's really great. And our members are just, more power to them for trying to create a space where we can talk to each other more easily and across all sorts of different lines.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. Tram, I know a lot of your focus of the organization is younger voters. Younger voters came out in record numbers last year, still lower relative to other age demographics, but we're making some real progress with young voters. As your organization talks to young voters ahead of this November election, do you get a sense that we may be able to maintain some of that excitement and engagement, or are young voters as always like that's the big nut to crack, the biggest challenge?
Well, I think with an off year like this year, it's the biggest hurdle is letting them know that there's an election, right? Like it's really, really hard because these are newly engaged folks, right? They typically sort of pay attention in big years, like presidential years, where there's a lot of communication and outreach. And then, I mean, I'm always reminding myself that 2021 is like almost over. It's like, what the hell happened to the year? We just finished 2020. Right. I feel like that's across the board. And with young folks in particular, it is just letting them know that there's even an election and then connecting it to the issues they care about. I hope that engagement is going to be as high as what we need it to be. But that's what keeps me up at night are the folks turn out that we need to turn out, whether that's young people, whether that's people of color, whether that's women. I mean, it's a big question mark.
Yeah. So we have time for one more question. This is a very important question of both of you. So I'm going to start with Gwen. Daily Kos is a community of activists, people who do stuff, take action. What can they do? What can the Daily Kos community do to help you accomplish your mission in Virginia?
Well, if you're just talking about making sure we win in November, and don't go backwards, as Tram said, I think obviously if you're anywhere near Virginia, you can join our phone banking or door-to-door knocking operations. You're welcome to join, Marcus. We also we're still raising money to put more people into the field. We're sort of maxed out at what we can do with the current funding levels, and we think every person that gets on the doors for that last month is able to convert a number of people who in their hearts are there, but for all the different reasons that we've laid out, need that personal connection. So I think maybe there's a way in the links or whatever to share how you can do that, but that would be incredibly helpful. Every laid off hospitality worker who's spending the next month knocking on doors in Virginia will help get us over the finish line.
Awesome. And Tram, your turn to talk about how the Daily Kos community can help you accomplish your mission.
Well, I don't think it'll shock anybody that it's always a hey, more resources would be great. So if folks could, donate. I know people are like, oh, it's so late.
At what link?
Hold on. I know people are like, it's so late in the cycle, but we can put that to good use. So donate links on our website, www.newvirginiamajority.org, all spelled out. Easy ways to link up there. And then also we are capturing volunteers from all over the country. So our Mobilize, on mobilize.com, we've got our own little profile there. You can sign up. We are phone banking every night. That's where a lot of our out-of-state volunteers are plugging. If you are in Virginia, in DC, in Maryland, we are canvassing every day. And on the weekends, come on down. We had some nice folks from Baltimore come down this weekend, and they were amazing. We have a crew from Seattle, Washington.
Whoa.
Who flew cross country and are canvassing with us, and they are amazing. So
I love it.
Make it work. If you want to help Virginia, it's an all hands on deck moment. So whatever you want to do, just reach out because we can plug you in.
That's
yeah,
fantastic.
and I think
and Virginia is gorgeous this time of year, just for the record, for anyone out of state looking for a little fall getaway where they can also, help elect some Democrats. Virginia is a great place for all of that. You got your leaf peeping, you got your door knocking. Let's make it happen.
We still have the 4 seasons, right? At least for now. It's over. So yes, we are in fall.
Yeah, I think for everybody it's important to realize that Virginia is not just important for now, not for even the results of this election for Virginia residents themselves. This will set the narrative in the broader media on what 2022 is going to be like. It'll affect recruiting from both parties. If Democrats do well, we may get better recruits. We get some retirements. If Republicans feel that, okay, this is going to be another year like last couple of cycles, they may retire. This really has a lot of trickle-down effects in ways that you can't even imagine. And Virginia, even the infrastructure you're helping build in Virginia now will help us because Virginia will be a U.S. House battleground next year as well. So Virginia is incredibly important. Everybody should help. We are going to provide links. I'm hoping, and I think we can do it, get Daily Kos to send out a fundraising email on both of your organizations' behalf, let people know about the fundraising and the ability to volunteer and be boots on the ground, because this is an absolutely critical election. And I'm so excited that we had you guys. Gwen, thank you so much from Unite Here, clearly a field savant, and so excited that you're doing this work in Virginia as well. Tram, so pleased to meet you. So pleased to know that New Virginia majority exists and that you're doing the work that you're doing. So I am in awe of what you guys do, because a lot of it is things that I couldn't. And I know, Gwen, I know you think I can, and maybe I could. Maybe I
believe in everyone. I really do.
So thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, y'all. Oh, that
Carolyn,
was awesome.
I know I'm supposed to feel, what was it, perpetual anxiety? Was that the term?
That's my job. I'm the resident, as the resident Virginian. I will take that on myself, and you can be hopeful or where else you'd like to be.
I'm feeling optimistic, and I was feeling optimistic in California. I'm optimistic that our people realize the importance of these elections and aren't going to sit it out like they did in 2009. I know you mentioned 2009. 2010 were disasters because liberals sat it out. They weren't happy with the pace of change from the Obama administration. And the fact that they sat out those years still haunt us to this very day.
Does it ever?
Because those maps that we're dealing with in places like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, those are maps from 2010, and we do not have the numbers now to draw more favorable maps. So we're going to be stuck probably with bad maps at the state level in many of these states. And these are the people that are doing the BS fraudits, like the one in Arizona. Mm-hmm. They're trying to do one now in Texas. I know Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin legislators are trying. So these elections matter. Off year, on year, doesn't matter. President, House, Senate, state legislator, your local mayor, your city council. These elections matter.
School board.
Oh boy, that extra matters right now.
Are happening now over things like, critical race theory
and masking. So these elections matter, and it's great to know that we have incredible people like Gwen and Tram that are on the ground working to make sure people realize, because not everybody's like us, plugged in and paying attention to politics. And we can't blame people for not. It's not that they're apathetic. It's not that they're stupid. It's not.
They just have lives to live. and that's
They
fine.
they
Live
have
your life.
lives. Yeah, exactly. And so it's if you have the ability to go and knock on doors and make phone calls, please do so. And if you have the ability to donate to these organizations, please do so. Even like a $5 recurring donation once a month. I mean, those things are gold for these organizations.
Literally every bit helps, especially for these down ballot elections. Literally,
Yeah.
every dollar.
And these are not. This is not like a presidential campaign that has $500 million budget and they're trying to get under $20 from you. These are organizations that may have $1 million budget, and they touch so many people. It is the best bang for the buck in the progressive movement. If you don't have a lot of money, that's the place to donate it to the organizations that are actually registering and turning out voters. Carolyn, do you have any last thoughts on Virginia?
Well, just it's funny it's always interesting to talk to people who are not from Virginia and live far away from Virginia about Virginia elections, since that is how we mark the passage of time here in the Commonwealth, because we literally have an election every single November. So yeah, but I mentioned earlier in the show about how one of the reasons people pay attention to Virginia is that it's very close to DC, and the Beltway media doesn't have a lot of other elections really to pay attention to this year. However, these are still very important no matter who you ask, where in the country, and whatever else they're doing. These elections are crucial, and will set the tone for next year, and will mean a lot for the future of Virginians all across the Commonwealth. Because will we continue to move forward, or are we going to backslide? We'll see.
Carolyn, thank you so much for joining me at the last minute. But glad you're able to join us, and glad you're able to add your Virginia expertise to this conversation.
Always.
Thanks to everybody that helped make the show possible. Walter Einenkel for producing it. Thank you, the viewer, for watching, listening, however you consume this broadcast, podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're doing everything you can to help in Virginia and your own corner of the world. You can keep up with us at Daily Kos on Twitter, I guess on Facebook too. And thank you so very much. See y'all next week.